We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. We're joined by Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Mr. Scott Cosenza, to discuss the latest happenings in the Trump immunity claims. Now, thanks for being here, Scott. And first off, I'd just kind of like to clarify something, if I may, about the not just the immunity case, but about all of the cases that are taking place involving Donald Trump right now. Is it fair to say that none of these cases would be moving with the speed, the ferocity, or the press coverage if they were not about the potential next president of the United States?
I'm trying to go through them in my head as you ask the question. My inclination is to say yes. I wonder if there's maybe one that could. But the funny thing is, so many of them wouldn't have ever been brought in a matter like they're new types of charges, right? So you can't compare them to what are the historical election interference charges that could be levied against a president who was not convicted upon impeachment in the federal criminal courts, because there's no example. But when you look at the pace of how federal criminal trials work generally in the federal criminal courts, you don't see them moving as fast as they're moving with Donald Trump, and not by a long shot. It's quite remarkable the kind of schedule pacing change that we're seeing.
So I do want to dig specifically into the immunity case, because that was at the Supreme Court recently, and I think there's a lot of interesting and fascinating things coming out of that. I'd just like to touch on something very quickly, and this is Representative Elise Stefanik, and she's filed an ethics complaint against the special prosecutor bringing a lot of these charges, Jack Smith. Now, I think we're all agreed that it's very much showmanship to file this kind of complaint, but there was one point that she made that I felt was quite pertinent to the thing. She was saying that according to the Department of Justice guidelines, there should be no other motive in the timeline of a case being brought. There shouldn't be any reason other than the actual purpose of the case to bring a timeline in advancement. And I think that's an important point, isn't it? Because this does seem like a very rushed procedure. Jack Smith.
Well, Mark, it's a true
Sure.
fact, but it's not important in the sense that the Joe Biden, right? The President Joe Biden, Merrick Garland Department of Justice is not going to look with a critical eye towards Mr. Smith because of the Stefanik complaint. And they are the ones they gave the man the job to put his foot on the gas to get it done by the election. I'm sure that there's no memorandum that spells that out, but if you need to read the memorandum, you're not going to get the job. The reason why we presume he got the job is because he knows what his orders are and what his paymasters want, and he's giving it to them just like they want it, which is a full frontal attack to hobble Donald Trump before the November elections. And that's what we're seeing. We don't have to think that there's collusion between Fani Willis, and even though there are some meetings to suggest there may have been, but we don't have to.
And
believe,
White House visits.
But we don't have to believe
logs.
There's collusion between the White House and Fani Willis, or with the Manhattan DA. We just think that they are all aligned in their goals, and so, or with Letitia James or any of the other. You go down.
There's so many.
List,
Alvin
right?
Bragg, Letitia James.
They just have the same common goal. Not that they are necessarily on a weekly conference call to discuss, achieving those goals.
Yeah. I think you're probably right on that. It's more, this is the job and this is what's expected.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have that job. Now, let's talk about the immunity claims here then. So you, being an avid Supreme Court watcher, Scott, why they haven't given you your own box like at Wimbledon?
I know, right?
I don't know, but you paid very close attention to the arguments. What was your overall impression of how the arguments from both sides was received?
It's funny. I wasn't focused on that sort of a conclusion. It was so interesting because this is a case of first impression. For people who don't know what that means, I'll just review it. It's the simplest thing. They haven't decided any of these rules before. This is the first time a past president has been criminally charged for acts he undertook while he was president, and he's asserting immunity. And there's not like, oh, well, if we go to the XYZ precedent or the court examined this or some other court. No, it's all new. And so how they're wrestling with it to me is, I guess at discussing it, I've come up with the answer to your question, which is they seem to be searching for, some resolution to the claim. If there is really no immunity, what does that mean? And my bias is that the people who are prosecuting Donald Trump don't necessarily care about what might happen, in 3 or 13 years regarding these claims. They're just out to get Trump. And it is the Supreme Court's job, certainly. Well, it's their job that they're advocating, and also the Supreme Court's job. I think that Justice Gorsuch said that we're deciding this for the ages. We're making a rule for the ages. And that's how most of them seem to, on both sides of the aisle or the left right block of the court seem to be wrestling with it. What does this mean? Does it mean that, somebody can do whatever they want? Does it mean that, we're going to have prosecutions ad infinitum for every president after they leave office now?
So there's two issues that spring to my mind from this. The first one is if the ultimate ruling is one that a president can be. This first one kind of ties in with the second one, but if a president can be prosecuted for crimes he committed whilst in office that were professional-based crimes, then we're going to see a lot of prosecutions against the 4 former other living presidents.
Yes, you have to add at the end of that for which he was acquitted in the Senate. That's the important coda. So there's been so much muddying of the waters as to what the Trump legal argument is, and I'll just restate it now. And it is that if a president is impeached and acquitted by the Senate, so the impeachment is sort of like, if we think about it colloquially with regular criminal justice terms, it's like an indictment. And then the trial in the Senate is more like a criminal trial, right, with a conviction or an acquittal. And President Trump was impeached twice and acquitted twice in the Senate. He wasn't convicted. And so his argument is if he did it and he was convicted of it, then there could be liability that would attach to it. But he's been judged to not be liable by the people's representatives, essentially a jury of, 435.
Technically, it's a jury of
or rather
325 million, isn't it? Because it's a representative.
Yes, that's the idea behind his claim of immunity, and that there is a unique position in the presidency that demands that kind of immunity for it to be practical at all to perform the duties, of the job. And I can tell you, Mark, that boy, there have to be right now, as we're talking, some district attorneys in places around the country that are as red as it gets politically, that have no challenges from any Democrat or other parties, and would love to indict Bill Clinton, Barack Hussein Obama, and Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. on any number of charges that will be filed the day. I think that these. If it's ruled that the president doesn't have immunity, I mean, wow, we're going to see a lot of flurry of charges at issue.
It would be former President Barack Obama who, I in my mind, but perhaps that's because of the generation that I kind of grew into politics with. But just off the top of my head, there's the Fast and Furious debacle where he and Eric Holder conspired to sell U.S. weapons to cartel members.
Mark, he ordered the death of American citizens in drone attacks for people who were the relatives of accused terrorists who themselves were not ever accused of being terrorists and were U.S. citizens. So I would expect that that homicide charge might be one that if I were an entrepreneurial prosecutor looking to make hay for myself, headlines, and get all sorts of attention, maybe in advance of a run for higher office, as so many prosecutors seem to want to do, that's what I would do.
I do believe that President Obama holds the record for the highest number of murders winner, Nobel Peace Prize winner. Is that about right, I would say?
I haven't checked the math on that.
So, Scott, we are going to continue this. Specifically, I want to be diving into whether Jack Smith even has standing to bring the prosecution. That's a very interesting question relative to an article that you wrote for the pages of libertynation.com last week. And we'll get back to that after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.